Little Misfortune is a dark adventure point-and-click published by Kill Monday Games in 2019 on the PC. This game comes to you from the same creators of the dearly beloved Friendbow, another creepy adventure that I still haven't had the chance of playing. In Little Misfortune, we follow Misfortune Ramirez Hernandez, an 8-year-old girl that sets out on a journey to find eternal happiness. Although this premise and the aesthetics of the game seem to tease a wholesome story, you'll quickly understand that could not be the furthest from the truth as you learn more about Misfortune's life and her surroundings. Little Misfortune begins with a mysterious narrator introducing us to our protagonist, stating that she's going to die that day. Clearly displeased with what she just heard, Misfortune speaks up to reveal the dearly named Mr. Voice is actually a voice in her head that she can clearly hear. Seemingly caught off guard, Mr. Voice offers Misfortune the opportunity to play a game that would allow her to achieve eternal happiness. After agreeing to this proposition, Mr. Voice begins the game by giving Misfortune a very simple first mission.
Leave the house.
However, before going on this adventure, you get to explore Misfortune's bedroom by interacting with some of her toys. This is where you see the first cracks forming in the beautiful scenery in front of you, as you rapidly come to the conclusion that Misfortune's parents are neglectful and abusive. Although this obviously affects Misfortune and her way of perceiving the world, she remains hopeful and determined to bring eternal happiness for her mother while sparkling everything she can with glitter. Glitter is involved in what is one of Little Misfortune's few mechanics. It needs to be thrown at specific objects, people, or animals that Misfortune believes need an extra bit of happiness. Still in her bedroom, you have the chance to read Misfortune's diary, which lays among other items in her secret hiding spot. Besides getting a general picture of Misfortune's life, this is how you learn of Misfortune's story with Benjamin, a blue-eyed fox she once met in her backyard and that she ultimately believes to be the one for her. It is also in this hideout that you get to see one of the game's very first choices: to leave or to take a coloring book. Just like that, you've been introduced to this game's last mechanic: seemingly meaningful choices. These will be a constant throughout the entire game, but I'll leave my thoughts on this for later. After exploring Misfortune's bedroom, you'll get to see a bit more of the rest of the house, going through a hallway that contains a vase that you may decide to fix, right into the kitchen where you'll find her mom cooking whilst drinking a glass of wine. In this section, you get the confirmation of Mom's bad drinking habits, as Misfortune refers to her as a juice drinker. The state of the kitchen itself is also extremely telling of Misfortune's unfortunate home life, as you can see cigarette butts on the dinner plates and an empty wine bottle in the sink. After spreading some glitter, Misfortune is finally outside with another apparently simple mission to accomplish.
Cross this road.
While trying to do so, there's a glimpse of what seems to be an hellish place, with a monster that scares Misfortune, a situation that Mr. Voice is way too quick to dismiss. However, feeling comforted by her invisible friend, Misfortune moves onwards into the woods to complete the game and find her prize. During this journey, a lot of things will happen to Misfortune, some of which you, the player, will be responsible for. The different situations Misfortune will find herself in include killing a dog, which can be done by one of two ways: flying through the sky, finding a dead body, coming across a hamster strip club and math lab, digging up graves, passing by the liquor store, going to the zoo, going to a scary fair, playing Whack-A-Fox, and eventually run for her life, all of this before returning home one last time. Throughout this adventurous time, there are a series of things that indicate a lot more is going on behind the scenes. Besides the occasional flashes to what appears to be hell, there are hay dolls scattered across the game that feature cryptic messages such as
"Everything begins with the song of a jackdaw,"
and
"Reality will transform into what the child desires the most."
These can be found and picked up by Misfortune herself in several of the places she visits, while the player is rapidly clued in on the fact that Benjamin the Fox is the one making these dolls and leaving them for her to find. Benjamin's multiple appearances are not to be overlooked as well, as you'll find them putting up posters that say "Hide your children," drawing runes, and eventually helping Misfortune get up after having fallen flat on her face. Suspiciously enough, Mr. Voice wants nothing to do with Benjamin.
Ugh, I don't care much for foxes.
This becomes extremely relevant in the later portion of the game, as the truth of everything that's happening finally comes to light, with Benjamin revealing it to Misfortune. The constant presence of missing children posters and the fact that there were some occurrences where Misfortune could see dead children were also huge indicators of what is this story's climax. After falsely accusing Benjamin of stealing Misfortune's eternal happiness, they need to go to the fox's cabin to get their coveted prize back. When inside, Misfortune has the opportunity to read Benjamin's diary, which uncovers the true identity of Mr. Voice as Morgo, an entity that Misfortune needs to be rescued from, and the monster that has been following her this entire time. Upon seeing Misfortune reading the diary, Morgo breaks into the cabin, stating that the fox
Can't hide the children.
as she and Benjamin run to the back door. After exiting, Misfortune finds Benjamin's bag, which contains a document for the students of Cinder City University that explains how to exterminate parasitic beings that come from a place called the Beyond, a realm where regular laws of physics do not apply. For those of you like me who have never played Franbo, this was a bit jarring as I had no clue what were the constituted 5 realms of essential existence, or I guess, free for short. To understand the story of Little Misfortune, we will fortunately only have to focus on 2 of these realms, Pandora and Cinder City, the 3rd and 4th realm respectively. Pandora is the human reality, where Misfortune comes from, while Cinder City, which is where Benjamin originates from, is a realm of death. Benjamin's job is thus to lead the souls of tormented children to Cinder City before parasites like Morgo lure them into the Beyond. In this particular case, Benjamin has been tasked to be Misfortune's protector, and that's why he's been trying to warn her about the danger that surrounds her using the hay dolls and posters. In fact, next to the document that explains Benjamin's purpose, there's a hay doll with a message that reads,
At the end of the road, you will realize you already signed the deal.
This is alluding to Little Misfortune's next big reveal. Misfortune has been dead since the beginning, having been run over in the street just outside her house. After having been saved by Benjamin, Misfortune walks outside to find her mom talking to the police while crying. Wondering why her own mother keeps ignoring her, Misfortune believes her mom might just be mad about her not getting the happiness. That's when she notices her own body covered by a white sheet, still laying on the middle of the road with an ambulance close by. As the realization of what happens hits her, Misfortune kneels down and starts to cry before Benjamin the Fox comes to console her and finally guide her soul to Cinder City. Misfortune then tells her mother she hopes she can find her eternal happiness before stepping inside the portal, following Benjamin until reaching a tree with 16 crystals. Each one of these crystals represent an item that needed to be sprinkled with glitter, with this being what determines which of the 2 endings you get to see. If you did not collect all the 16 sparkling locations, you'll see Misfortune being received at a door by what appears to be a female version of the Grim Reaper. Misfortune walks inside, the door closes, and it finally fades to black. This is considered to be the regular ending. Conversely, if you were indeed able to sparkle everything with glitter, you'll get the good ending, where all the branches of the tree glow before turning into one ball of light that goes straight into Misfortune's mom's heart. This is a representation of the eternal happiness that Misfortune won, which leads to her mother removing a mask that all adults in the game use to hide their feelings. Just like that, Little Misfortune is over, and I don't remember the last time I felt this happy to see the credits roll. I'm going to go straight to the point here. I really disliked Little Misfortune. In fact, I believe there is little to be celebrated about this game, as I kept finding things I either hated, disliked, felt poorly thought out, or rushed. However, before I start to explain the reasons why Little Misfortune was a huge miss in my books, I want to begin with a more positive note, by highlighting the best things this game has to offer. The first is obviously its graphics. The art style is pleasing to look at, while simultaneously being excellent at keeping the player inside this world of childlike wonder and naivete. Although sometimes the difference in the art styles between cutscenes and gameplay sequences was a bit jarring, I was still able to appreciate the quality of the unique designs and animations nonetheless. I particularly liked the small designs and animations in the loading screens, as the art style was really simple and almost reminiscent of an actual child's drawing. The other thing I really liked was the voice acting. Misfortune's voice was the right amount of irritating and sweet,
But I want to find Benjamin. He was nice to me.
while the narrator's voice was simply brilliant. The actor did an incredible job at making Mr. Voice sound caring, but always with enough nuance in its tone to remind the player something is going on and that perhaps Mr. Voice is not to be trusted.
Really? You don't remember me saying if you keep running, you'll end up hurt?
However, even though the voice actor made this great effort to try and keep you guessing on whether you should trust the narrator or the fox, I believe the storytelling works in a completely different direction. Every time there was a flash to the beyond, Mr. Voice would be really quick to dismiss it or would just plainly ignore it.
You don't know what you're talking about.
Additionally, his huge hate for foxes wasn't helpful at keeping any sense of doubt about who's the real bad guy here.
You shouldn't trust a fox. They're all criminals.
Especially when Benjamin doesn't even speak. All of this added to the fact that you already go into this game expecting a dark adventure, unfortunately made me able to tell way too quickly that Mr. Voice was the enemy. Similarly, Misfortune's death was also something I figured out extremely early on, as not even a third of the way in, I had already written it down in my notes. The fact that she could hear Mr. Voice at all, and the flashes to what you later learn is the beyond, were already huge giveaways. But when you add the scene where Misfortune is carried by birds through the air and doesn't get hurt at all in the process, as well as her ability to see dead kids, there was no doubt in my mind that she had already been killed. This really hindered my experience with Little Misfortune, as the conclusion to the story was already living in my head before even getting close to finishing the game. Considering how obvious everything is from the beginning, one could argue that the developers did this intentionally, not once having meant to make Misfortune's death or Mr. Voice's real form shocking revelations. However, if that were the case, they should have made a much better job at keeping everything else interesting, the characters, and most importantly, the events that occur. In that case, maybe I could have enjoyed the story even with the inexistent payoff at the end, but that was sadly far from what I felt while playing Little Misfortune. Let's start with the thing I believe almost instantly ruined the game for me. The terrible attempt at making Misfortune sound like a real naive child. Being only 8 years old, there's a lot of things Little Misfortune shouldn't be able to understand or talk about. This is depicted in the game in several instances, like seeing a dead bird and thinking it's only sleeping,
Look, a sleepy bird.
carrying a fish in her pocket and not understand that it will die without water,
His name is Rodrigo and he needs a new place to stay.
mistaking a hanging dead body for a piñata,
Hang himself like a piñata? Should I hit him like a piñata?
and saying her mother drinks juice when referring to wine.
When I grow up, I want to be just like my mommy, a juice drinker.
Misfortune's Diary was probably the piece that establishes Misfortune's naivety the best, with her descriptions of the way she feels for Benjamin as the puke of love, and her wondering if it's okay to hit people because her dad hits her mom. Although these could be great examples of instances where Misfortune really felt like a kid, they're for the most part extremely poorly written, sometimes giving off the vibe that an adult wrote these lines. Take this section of the diary as an example. Misfortune was writing about Christmas, glitter, and the fact that she doesn't think Santa is real. Suddenly, there's 2 paragraphs about starving people before she continues to talk about glitter and Santa. This felt a bit disconnected, as no way a kid that's thinking about making sad and bad things look prettier with glitter would say, if a man could give everyone a gift, why can't he give poor people water and food? Doesn't make sense. It's like someone told her that was the right thing to think or write. The way Misfortune's naivety is also inconsistent was probably the last nail in the coffin for me. After everything that I just described, Misfortune knows her mother is drunk all the time, despite not even being able to call wine by its name. She explains very clearly how her parents tried to abort her and how a friend accidentally shot her own parents, even though she doesn't understand the consequences of death. It doesn't make sense. She either knows what an abortion is or doesn't, and if she's talking about it like she understands what it means, it wouldn't be something that Misfortune would talk about lightly. It really irked me how little thought it seemed to have been put into one of this game's main aspects, the contrast between the childlike wonder and the harsh reality. Another thing that made my experience with Little Misfortune so poor was the humor. The jokes and gags were constantly coming up throughout the game, but they just never landed for me. I never laughed, I actually sighed every time one came up. The offensive bird whose scientific name is Fuckadilius this shitus, the fart joke when Misfortune is trying to escape, the dink painting next to the dead body, the mother cow shitting all over the baby cow, and the constant ha ha ha, a kid is swearing moments were all times I kept thinking to myself, what am I doing playing this game? Even if some of these were attempts at making simple, easy humor that younger children, like Misfortune, would appreciate, I don't think that should be the target of a game that is in fact catered to an older audience. The attempt at social commentary was also too on the nose for my taste. In Little Misfortune, you learn adults wear face masks that hide their true emotions, helping them fake a smile. As seeing every human walk around in a mask wasn't explicit enough, Misfortune passes by a store called Happy Face, which explains the use of said masks.
It says, let's face it, sometimes we're just too tired to smile. Use happy face and stop pretending.
The concept of wearing a mask, whether physical or metaphorical, to hide your true emotions has been explored many times before in various types of media. You have American Psycho, where Patrick Bateman is seemingly a well-adjusted, incredibly socially apt man, when in reality he has a huge taste for committing gruesome murders. In House MD, Dr. House appears to be extremely narcissistic and enigmatic when inside he's just completely broken due to the trauma he experienced. If you're looking for a more literal representation of this, more closely related to the one portrayed in Little Misfortune, look no further than We Happy Few, which is a game where people wearing masks that force them to be happy is a main storyline. There's just been so many interpretations of this same thing, and Little Misfortunes does not strike me as neither one of the best or one of the worst, as it could simply not exist and the story wouldn't change. The only thing that is even slightly impacted by the existence of these masks is the true ending, where Misfortune's neglectful mother removes her mask after getting the eternal happiness, and I was not about to feel sorry for a neglectful drunk mother. Even if this was supposed to create a contrast between the painfully aware adults and the blissfully ignorant kids, it greatly missed the mark. So its introduction just felt forced and actually pointless. In regards to Mr. Voice and the way he tried to help Misfortune achieve the goals he had set out for her, I found some issues with its boundaries. Throughout the game, Mr. Voice intervenes several times to guide Misfortune in the right direction, sometimes offering advice, sometimes stepping in more directly, being more hands-on. While at the Magic Cave, Misfortune finds a bag of pills that she mistakes for mints. Mr. Voice says nothing, and Misfortune eats them as the player is pulled into a cutscene.
Wow, I'm feeling really nice.
However, 2 minutes later, Mr. Voice gives her a slingshot to scare the hamsters out of the meth lab.
How?
With a slingshot.
What slingshot?
This slingshot.
Ah, that slingshot, okay.
What was the difference? Is there any criteria that determines whether or not Mr. Voice aids Misfortune in any way, or he just helps her when he feels like it? To me, it honestly felt like plot convenience, which would just reveal how poor thought out the story of this game really is. The fact that Mr. Voice was never able to see the hay dolls Benjamin left behind was also something I found really strange, as he was able to see the runes, the posters, and Benjamin clearly. Although in this case there may be some explanation related to the plot, maybe the fox uses some kind of thing to hide the dolls from Mr. Voice. However, considering how I was never at any point given an explanation as to why this happened, my mind yet again flew to plot convenience. And again, in what is a story-driven game, that's just terrible and uncovers a huge lack of effort. Before I stop complaining about the story itself and go on to tell you what my thoughts were in regards to gameplay, I just briefly want to mention the document in Benjamin's bag. After going from place to place, trying to complete these goals, finding out that Mr. Voice is evil and that Misfortune has been only but deceived in the entirety of the time you've been with her, the explanation with the whys and the hows is done using a piece of paper that tells you everything you need to know. I am aware that Benjamin does not speak, but I believe Mr. Voice's reveal as Morgo could have been greatly improved by having him explain at least some of this to us, perhaps with some cool visuals accompanying the exposition. Unfortunately, reading the document felt like an extremely dull way to uncover the story. Do not get confused, I'm not complaining about having to read a bit. I'm complaining about the lack of effort, again, which unfortunately contributed to Little Misfortune's story being a tedious tale that got me thinking I'd been playing this game for 30 hours instead of just 3. Unfortunately, Little Misfortune's story isn't its only problem, as it also severely lacks in terms of gameplay. The main game mechanic is constituted by 2 main components, the choices you make and the sparkle locations. Let's start with the first. During the game, you'll encounter an abundant number of choices, with some being more impactful than others. In the beginning, you get to pick which toy Misfortune brings along with her. You can choose between Stony, a rock that still has the bloodstain from when Misfortune's dad threw it at her head, and the plushie of a unicorn. Regardless of which you choose, most interactions are the same, with both toys participating in a dance battle and Misfortune buying them a clothing item at the end. The only exception is that you can choose to use Stony to break a window at the zoo. Likewise, while in the docks, you can carry Rodrigo the fish in your pocket and then choose its destiny by either feeding it to a seagull or by using it to lure a kraken later on. In the caves, if you choose to stop the hamsters from fighting, you won't get inside the strip club. These are 3 examples of meaningful choices you'll find in Little Misfortune, where your actions will definitely differ according to what you select for Misfortune. However, this is as impactful as it's going to get, as the ending is never affected by them. Additionally, most choices are completely void of any real effect, with a lot of them only defining what Misfortune talks about next. The segments where Misfortune walks by herself are exemplary in illustrating this. The only thing you get to do in this is watch and pick the answers for Mr. Voice's questions. Nothing changes, not right there, not later on, you just hear what Misfortune has to say regarding the response you chose. I particularly dislike these sequences as I felt they could have been substituted by a cutscene. I couldn't control much, and the little thing I had control over had no impact. The overall irrelevance of the choice system was something that I felt extremely disappointed about, coming close to the feeling I got when I reached the end of the first Life is Strange game. So, everything I did until now didn't matter, huh?
Yes?
Then why bother?
Damn it.
In this case, I believe there may be an actual answer to this. In my opinion, the actual meaningless choices gave you a false sense of power, like you could change something about Misfortune's fate or storyline, when in reality, Morgo had everything under control. Honestly, I perhaps could have been able to appreciate this, were the plot to be enthralling by itself, having been able to capture my attention instead of making me count the minutes until the game was over. Besides, the sparkling glitter mechanic is by far not nearly enough to keep you engaged, as the sparkle locations are sparsely scattered and only result in a cute sticker appearing on screen. Although a relatively nice depiction of a child's imagination, this glitter throwing mechanic is way too dull to be what eventually determines which ending you get, especially when the story involves as many choices as this one did. The way Little Misfortune sometimes forced you to interact with certain objects in a specific order for the sake of the story was also something I really disliked. A prime example of this occurs during Misfortune's stay in the janitor's apartment. The room was clearly filled with interactive items, going as far as having a hay doll sticking out of one of the boxes in the bottom left corner of the screen. However, before I interacted with the door, I could only hear Misfortune talk about the wolf poster. I just wanted the game to let me explore by myself, finding what was needed to escape the janitor independently. I know, Morgo is moving all the strings, you have no power, yes, I know, but that should never be an excuse to turn sections of a game into near walkthroughs, greatly hindering the player's experience in the process.
So if I don't have regrets, the wolf will let me pet it?
What?
Speaking of, Misfortune's commentary also did no favors to the game, as it was usually dull and added little to no information about how she really feels about certain things or what's happening around her. There were times where Misfortune would just read whatever was already written in a poster or sign and add little sentences like,
"Give yourself a fuck." Oh, really?
or her
Yikes forever.
catchphrase. Not only were most of these instances a waste, as I could have learned more about Misfortune, but also made me feel like it wasn't worth it to interact with some items. And honestly, I found myself only doing it because I was recording. At the very least, her commentary should be enough for us to learn more about her personality. But apparently, there is none. She's
Such a clever little lady.
a cute 8-year-old that says cute things and sometimes talks about her traumatic experiences. That's all I knew in the beginning. That's all I know now. In a game that is heavily story-focused, I believe this to be a huge flaw that greatly impairs your experience. Unfortunately, this is just another aspect among many of Little Misfortune that could have been improved with a bit more effort and thought given to the overall story. In terms of controls, there's not much to say, besides the only thing that kind of felt odd was the introduction of button mashing in the later portion of the game. It felt out of place, and it was only used a couple of times, one of them being to get Misfortune off the floor after a brief moment of defeat. I wish I could have left her there. Overall, Little Misfortune suffers from a severe case of what could have been. The story could have been impactful, and instead, I was left with a very predictable tale of boredom, growing from one point to the next, with almost no connection between each section. I could have cared about Misfortune, but there's only so many yikes forever I can hear and take. Perhaps I couldn't appreciate Little Misfortune as much as it deserved because of the fact that I've never played its predecessor, but as a game that's only loosely connected, being part of the same universe, Little Misfortune should be able to stand on its own. In Misfortune's own words,
Yikes forever.